I'm Nadia Jordana, and you're watching Where Women Talk. My guest today, Donna Mathiowetz, is an author and a speaker. She writes books and makes presentations to help people navigate loss and grief. She has a brand new book out, so let's go talk to her and find out about that. Welcome to the show, Donna.
Well, thank you for having me, Nadia. This is great. I'm so glad you asked me to join you.
I'm delighted that you could be here today. As I understand, you're an author and speaker. You have a brand new book.
I do.
And what I'm wondering is, what's the title of that brand new book? What inspired you to write it?
Well, what inspired me to write it was that our story is our life story. My husband and I have been married for just 48 years. It was last month. And we just have had many opportunities to kind of write a story that is, I guess, unique. And every time I tell even part of what's happened in our life to people, I've heard for years, you need to write a book. You just need to write a book. And I knew I did, but the real reason I finally, and this is my COVID victory, actually, I wrote this after COVID started, finished it, I should say, and got it published and out there. So that's the one positive thing that has come for us during COVID. But what I knew I wanted to do was write our story in my own words for my grandchildren and their children and those we will not meet. And so it was important for me to have it in a book, to carry on kind of for our legacy to be in writing the way I knew it to be.
It is real important, and we think about our legacies and our families, and we think these stories are going to be there forever, but when we're gone, they tend to fade away. So it is really important to do exactly what you're doing. Again, what was the title, and how did you come up with that title?
The title is What Have You Done Since I Left? I'll just hold it up quickly here. This is what it looks like, with a clock and a calendar, and Ann Obbitz, of course, designed that for me, does great work for me all the time. But what have you done since I left? It comes from a situation. My husband and I have facilitated grief support groups here in Hastings, and I've spoken at many other grief groups throughout the area. And during, when someone comes into a grief group meeting, especially those that might be just beginning their journey, and they can be, of course, sad and sometimes even somewhat despondent, not really seeming to care about what they'll do from now on without their husband or their wife or this child that died or whatever it might be. And I don't usually have to ask the question, but someone else who's further along on their journey will usually say to this person, but what would they want you to do? And so my husband said it was during one of those conversations that he kind of wasn't listening to what was being said in the meeting, but instead he had this, I don't know what you want to call it, a vision, a dream, something that started running in his mind, a little video that was playing out in his mind. And he envisioned himself having died and gone to heaven. And there he met our son, Tim. Our son, Tim, died almost 29 years ago at the age of 16. And so we've been on this journey of grief for a long time. But anyway, my husband met Tim there. And of course, there was this wonderful reunion. And then they sat down at a table, as Dick described this. And Tim reached across the table and grabbed his dad's hands. And with eyes wide open, with great expectation, he said, "Dad, tell me everything you've done since I left." So that's where the title of the book comes from. What have you done since I left? And I often use this when I speak to various groups. I sometimes tell that story as a way to close out what I want to leave with them, because I think it does leave people, whether you're grieving the loss of a loved one or whatever it might be, for all of us to contemplate. Wow, and I can't tell you that will happen. I have no way of knowing that's what happens when we reunite with loved ones. But what if it was? And what would you want to be able to tell them?
Yeah, what if it was? And it very well could be. I think that's fantastic. And I think about the people who would appreciate your book and your speaking. And I think about your family, of course, but my family and everyone else's family Tell me about what your ideal audience, who are the people that this book primarily touches?
Well, I would say it's certainly for someone who is grieving, but I also got to finish something in that book that is kind of my next passion next to walking alongside people in grief, is trying to help others understand how they can be of help to these people. I think our society as a whole, we're not very comfortable with death and dying and losses. And I want to do what I can to educate us to be better at it. And so there's a section in my book. What I was able to do is I talked to, I think it was 8 or 9 people who I have met throughout the last few years of working with grief groups. And I asked 8 of them to answer three questions for me. As you entered your grief journey, what was helpful? What was not helpful? And have you come to a place where you can find any hope or meaning or purpose in what has occurred in your life? And so I some of them wrote just a little bit, others wrote a couple pages for me. And I just kind of, I didn't edit hardly much of it at all. I just put it in there as they wrote it, because I wanted people to hear from someone other than me, telling them what I think would be helpful, but to hear it. And much of it, was kind of amazing, Nadi, is that there was quite a bit of repetition. Out of the 8, there were some themes running through every one of them, especially in the part that's what wasn't helpful and what was helpful. But I left it that way because I wanted to make an impact on the reader, to say, oh, I see 6 of the 8 people all said the same thing here. I guess it's worth thinking about and making sure that I remember that the next time I have a chance to come alongside someone in grief.
Oh, absolutely. And it just occurred to me as you were telling those stories that even persons who might be getting older in life, much older in life, or who might have an illness and are grieving, coming to the close of their own life, there might be much purpose there in relation to their families and this book. So I can see that. Go ahead, please comment.
I was going to say, and grief, I speak of grief a lot, of course, coming into our lives through death. But as we all know, grief comes in many, many ways. Divorce is a huge one. We grieve greatly when there's a divorce, and that can go on for a long, long time. As you just said, kind of, life is changing. I don't like this new season, but it is, it's part of the cycle of life. Loss of jobs, and and now sitting in this time right now we're in with COVID, I continue to know that we are collectively grieving a variety of things, in our homes, in our communities, and in society as a whole. So there's just a lot going on that I believe my book can speak to and give hope to it. Some of the stories are sad because, of course, I go into more detail about our son Tim's death. And actually, 2 years after that, we had a foster adopt son, a 15-year-old boy that we had brought out of a Ukrainian orphanage who died of cancer. So we have, way more experience than I would ever have chosen to have. But it's what we have, and I just know that I had to use this, not let it go, let it be for nothing, but instead to use it to help other people. Because I believe everyone's life experience can be that. The good, the bad, and the in-between. We can use it all for something that can make it good again.
Absolutely. And this year especially, I think that's true. Yeah. I'm wondering, like I myself, I started writing in high school and then dropped it for many years and got back to it as an adult. What's your history as far as when you first discovered you might be a writer, and how did that play itself out in your life?
It's actually quite recent, really. About 3.5, almost 4 years ago, I'd been doing a lot of speaking, just casually, and then I'd get asked to speak at that group and this group and a few community organizations, companies and things. And I finally thought, maybe it's time I, kind of take this on the road and make it official and, form the LLC and all those things that we can do. And I just did that about 4 years ago. And then I got connected with Annie Meehan, and she is also a wonderful speaker, author herself, but she also does coaching. And so I went to several sessions with Annie, and she said, I understand you want to speak, and she knew that I already had this other book, kind of ruminating in my heart and my mind. But she said, what about doing something that you could probably pull together a little faster, and something really easy to access? And so I created my journal. It's called Your Journal for Your Journey. And this is very short. What I know about people in grief is that sometimes reading a whole book is just too much at first. And so I made it 1 or 2 pages of little things that I learned along the way after our son's death, after Tim's death. And I followed it with a page or 2 of maybe a question or a phrase, and then left some space for people to write a little bit if they wanted to, kind of introducing them to journaling in a very simple way. And so that's where it started. And then I, was able to use that and use that along with my speaking. And then 2 years later, this book finally came along.
Oh, how great. Well, I think that's fantastic how that all came about. With about a minute left, can you tell me, is there something that maybe I haven't asked you about that you would love for the audience to know about you as a writer, or about what you're doing?
Well, what I've been doing, and fortunately, it's kind of amazing that my calendar has become quite white over the last few months, of course, because the speaking engagements I had, all just dropped off. I did a few with Zoom, but it's been really quiet for a couple months. But what I've discovered is now people are still contacting me just in the last couple days, and I'm doing a couple more Zoom things. So I don't speak with just grief groups. I've spoken with corporations. I've spoken for Life Source, the organ procurement organization out of Minneapolis, because I can bring this message of not just if you are grieving, here's what I want to tell you, but I can lean more towards. I ask the question of an audience, would you like to be better and more comfortable at coming alongside someone else who's going through a really difficult time in their life? And most people go, yeah, please. I said, we all know the sweaty hands when we see someone who's just gone through some loss, and like, what do I say? What don't I say? And I really, I believe that 99% of the people out there do not say things or neglect to say things because they want to make us feel any worse than we already feel. They simply don't know. And, we don't know what we don't know. So I love to help people learn more about how we come alongside, because our society needs that. We need to be better helpers. And I think I have ways to help people do that.
I like the phrase come alongside, because we are afraid to make a mistake.
Yes.
To hurt someone even further who's already hurting.
That's right.
Well, Donna, our time is up. Thank you for being on the show today. This was really great. I'm interested in that book. So it'll be wonderful to see, to get my copy and to be able to maybe share it with some friends. Wonderful. And again, thanks for being on the show today.
Thank you, Nadia. I appreciate it so much.
And thank you everyone for watching. We'll see you next time on Where Women Talk with a brand new guest.